Hi. While we would all like to think that we have seen the last of racially charged killings, such as the recent slayings of Alton Sterling and Philando Castile, the reality is such incidents have been occurring for a long time, and they are not about to disappear until there is concerted national effort to end them. What's new is that such slayings are being caught on camera, making them an inescapable part of mainstream American reality. Today I'm going to be sharing with you some effective responses that have been seen in the face of this. But first I want to ask you to take a good look at the image I have up. Many of you have seen this image before, but I want you to just take a moment to check in with yourself and notice how you feel as you look at this image. Please let yourself go there with me for a moment. Let it affect you. And notice, what is the effect that this image has on you? Now, take a look around you. Take a look at the other people who are in the room with you. All right? This is a very diverse room. And every person in here feels something when they look at this image, or at least they did the first time they saw the image. But depending on how much the man being forcibly restrained looks like members of your family, some of you are being more affected than others. This is important to note because oftentimes in the workplace, emotional trauma that's being experienced by employees of color does not get addressed simply because the people deciding whether a response is necessary are not as deeply affected as the ones who are needing the support. The situation of being in a workplace and not being able to express all of the emotion that you have is a secondary form of trauma. When people go into work and it's business as usual, that has an effect on the people who are not having an experience of business as usual that counts as a secondary trauma. It's as if they're re-traumatized. Professor Javdani of NYU has said that video footage that documents violence and lower relative safety for members of a group to which you belong can be a heavy psychological burden that builds. In fact, it's an extra burden if there is a sense of a worsening, an escalation of that violence. And notice I say if there is an appearance of the escalation, because even if there is not actually escalation, just more documentation, the experience that people have is that it feels like it's escalating. Now, some people take a business as usual attitude the day following a racially charged slaying. But for people who identify with the person who's been slain, that's simply not possible. The fear, the anger, and the sadness that is very likely to arise doesn't just go away simply because it's being ignored. In fact, the worst thing that a company can possibly do in the face of racially charged slayings is to expect people of color to show up the next day as if they're unaffected and to pretend that they are unaffected. But now I want to share with you some of the things that companies have been getting right. The response of Square Incorporated to the recent slayings I referred to earlier presents an exceptional example of what getting this right looks like. Number one, working with their Black Employee Resource Group, they issued a public statement in solidarity with those directly affected by the killings and stating their position in opposition to racial injustice in general. Two, They supported employee-initiated die-ins, which you see a picture of here, where any employee, regardless of ethnic heritage, was able to lie on the ground wearing black as a visual reminder and stimulant for people to reflect on the losses that had occurred in the people who had died. And 3, diversity and inclusion staff immediately mobilized to support people emotionally. Now, when I learned of this, which I learned when I was interviewing someone for an article, I cannot tell you the emotion that I felt and how proud I was that my company is a Square customer. I can honestly say that I am no longer just a customer. I am a fan. Now, why did Square's response to the killings have such a deep impact on me? Because they demonstrated in their actions, even at the risk of their public reputation, because not everyone agrees with them, but they demonstrated that they care about me and other people in my ethnic identity group. Respect, appreciation, valuation. These are a two-way street. Another excellent example of what doing it right might look like was an effort that was actually coordinated across multiple companies. Letters for Black Lives is a crowdsourced project that organized first-generation Asian Americans to write a group letter to their immigrant parents telling them how important the Black Lives Matter movement was to them personally, and encouraging their parents to support it also. The project has since been translated into 30 languages with participants from Asia, Africa, and Latin America. Now I'm going to ask you to take this to a certain place with me. I really wish that right now I could actually brainstorm with you and hear your ideas about effective responses so that together we could draw upon what I'm sure is exceptional experience, wisdom, and knowledge that is in this room. But what I would like to ask you to do with the time that we have is to just take a journey with me. And please imagine what it would be like for you personally if for 24 hours you were inundated with images of someone who looks like you being brutally attacked by a group of armed men, ultimately ending in the person's death. Please take a moment and go there with me in your imagination. What would that feel like for you? Now imagine that you go into work the next day, still feeling this emotional trauma, and everyone around you is acting like nothing's happened. They're talking about a sitcom that was on the night before. How does that feel to you? Now, some of you don't have to imagine, right? You can remember, right? Whether you are imagining or remembering, please take it one step further. What would you need that day that would really make you feel emotionally supported? And when I ask that, I don't mean what would someone need. I really mean you. Personally, what would make you feel like the company that you work at cares about you, values you, and is meeting you emotionally? Would you want your boss to come up and speak to you and check in with you and ask you how you're doing? Would you want the company to gather together in some sort of group mourning? Would you want any such gathering to be restricted only to members of your ethnic group? What if such slangs were happening every month? Would you need a different kind of support in an ongoing basis? What might that look like in practice? So I wish that I could hear the answers that you've been coming up with to these questions, but more important than that, I wish that you could hear each other. But what we can do is to continue this conversation online. You can see on the screen my contact information, there's my Twitter handle, there's my email address. I encourage you to share your ideas, sharing something that you think either an individual or a company could effectively do to support you if you are or were a person of color during a time of heightened racial conflict, tension, and stress. And if you have a lot to say, then I encourage you to write an article on something like LinkedIn or Medium, and then share the link to that. And I'll find them by both mentioning me and the tech inclusion hashtag, and I will consolidate those. And don't worry about your idea having to be implementation ready, okay? It does not have to be detailed. This is more about opening up a dialogue so that many minds can come together to engage in answering a very important question. What does it actually look like to truly support a diverse workforce? Not just having them there in the numbers, but to truly be inclusive in who gets held. When the question is asked, the solution begins shaping itself. And I want to invite you to join with me in shaping a more effective response so that next time there is an inevitable racially charged killing, your company and other companies can be prepared to provide more effective support. Thank you.